Mike Mahoney needs no introductions, I don't think.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Anything's go tonight, I think. Questions on anything turning, but the demonstration is just going to be a paper thin bowl. The PCC there, my friend Joel brought this silver maple. Um, I brought a bunch of samples of really thin bowls, not paper thin. These were all off the tool. This guy's really thin. That so this is also very wood related. You have to have green wood to turn them this thin, not dry ones, because it won't cut that thin. You generally, this is a piece of sycamore, real easy to work and cut real thin. Going over into the oaks, this is a piece of white oak, not as easy to go thin because white oak has a really strong medullary ray, that little line that comes out of the rim there. That's it's really weak there, so they tend to crack. So you can notice this bowl is about a 16th of an inch and not a 32nd like that other one. And then just also notice the way this is shaped. That was deliberate, and it was how I cut it out of the log. The center of the tree's there, and so it was relatively well balanced. So when it dried, it kind of ovaled nicely. I love this look in a bowl, and it's a calabash, meaning it doesn't have a bottom, just like the one I'm going to make tonight. Um, if this was green and finished green, and I put a flat bottom on it, it would never sit flat. So you cure that just by putting a round bottom on it, and it never has a problem laying flat. Nobody questions the fact that it doesn't lay flat because it's obvious it doesn't have a flat bottom. Calabash bowls typically would have never had a flat bottom because the Aboriginal cultures that use these bowls didn't need a flat surface to put their items on because they didn't have flat surfaces. They use dirt or sand or wherever they live. So, and again, you can just kind of look how this one's pretty thin. You can see the heartwood over here, sapwood over here. Not a well balanced bowl, but it didn't move at all, even though it should have because this was soaking wet. But what made this stable is it was a 500-year-old tree, and it's basically quarter sawn. There's no angle in that annual ring. So when you look at a bowl, look at how the rings are placed in the bowl, and they'll tell you a lot about where it was cut out of the tree, obviously. But this one's quarter sawn. This tree was maybe 8 or 9 foot in diameter. So it was a big piece. Those are the kind of trees I look for my business because
Want
it
some
makes really good
popcorn?
quarter sawn work. So
Popcorn?
to get a
Sure.
quarter sawn this thick is pretty special. Interesting. And then this one's a white oak again. This has been bleached just to give it some interest to it. But these were all just demo pieces, nothing that's fit for a gallery or anything. They were just items I did in front of a crowd. And then some of my finished work over here. These are
Damn it.
Peppermill has the black top, African blackwood, and then the salt mill has a holly top, and these are hollow as well, so they're not just drilled through. They're pretty nice works. And then this is part of a set. This is our local cottonwood. Um,
I don't want to play.
there's a whole bunch of
I don't
pieces
want
that
to
go
play.
in the set. I just brought these tonight, but this has been varnished, and the inside is raw. Okay, this is meant for use, and the best finish for use would be no finish, in my opinion. Granted, if you put coffee grounds in here and it turns it into dark stained coffee, that's a good thing, in my opinion, because coffee smells real good. So, and if you try, like, let's say you varnish the inside, like I varnished the outside, that smell won't go away for years. And so you can't put any food in it. So, raw, if you can see, the next best thing to raw is walnut oil because I can't sell bowls that are just raw because people don't appreciate them. They don't have the look that an oil can give. But for me, the best thing about a bowl like this is how well you beat it up in the kitchen. And if it looks like this after 6 months of you owning it, I'll take it back. You're not meant to have a wooden bowl. This is all philosophy you're hearing here from a wood turner. So, yeah, feel free to look at those things. Paper thin bowl. Let's go for it. I'll start from all the way to the start. The green wood here. Joel cut me some logs. These aren't balanced, I can tell, because if this was balanced, that little piece of bark right there would be on this side too. So that would have been a much smaller tree, but I think this was a 30-inch tree. Yeah, it was a big tree. So it's hard. I wouldn't balance things just for balancing purposes because bows are beautiful no matter where you cut them out of the log. I mean, this bowl here is completely unbalanced, but you wouldn't say no to it, right? It's got sapwood over here. There's no sapwood over here. That black line there is the graft line where the California walnut was married to the English walnut, and this wasn't English walnut; it was a hybrid paradox walnut, but very similar. Get your eyes on that if you get a chance. It's kind of hard to find a bowl with a solid graft in it. What else? Anything? Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna. I'll make a calabash bowl shape because that'll make it a little more difficult. Something with a enclosed surface like that, and then I'll just take you through the process of how to get them paper thin. I don't know if we'll go paper thin tonight. Just depends. 9:45 tomorrow morning. I get 3 fingers surgically fixed, so I'm looking forward to that. No, just trigger finger. I can't. They don't close, and if they do, it hurts. Steve, you ever have trigger finger? It's arthritis, a form of arthritis. Yeah, that's about from here to here. After bull in my whole life. Okay, let me take you through the whole process. I have a screw center on the chuck. My finger's right in the way. There you go. There's my screw. I attach everything to the lathe with that, and on my block of wood here, I've got a hole that matches that. I do this on all my work. I don't use a spur drive much unless it's spindle work. By the way, oh wow, a dead center. I haven't seen one of those in years. Let's take a look. What else have we got in here? Some dinosaurs looking around. This is the center that came with the lathe. Give that to somebody you don't like. I'm thinking. The problem with this center is it's got a really large diameter, and the one I have here, if I can pop that out, this is the one from home. It's got a much smaller diameter, and you really would appreciate that doing any side grain work when that area is smaller. I don't know, some things like this are made and they continue to be made because nobody's really critiqued the engineer who pops these things out, and you go, hey, that's not that good. And you never like to tell an engineer that his baby's ugly, right? Because they never accept criticism. And then this is the dead center. And that one doesn't even spin, so it just kind of smokes the wood as it work with it. That's again for spindles. And you see a lot of people use, and especially on YouTube, it's just a cone. Well, those are no good for side grain. So if you're using those and you're not doing any form of bolt, throw that in for spindle work. It's not good for this. You want a center like that. Okay, so this is how I attach it to the lathe. I'm 158 RPMs there. Going to throw that right on there. Let that spin up. There we go. And if you get hurt doing that operation, you didn't listen to what I just said. 150 RPM, threw it up there. When it got to the top, I moved my hands out of the way. That's perfectly safe. And you didn't want razor sharp bark hanging out here either. So I inspected all this before this went on. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Yeah, when that big point hits the back of your bowl, for instance, it makes a nice deep center in there. And what you don't see on my cone there is I've almost erased it, so it'll just barely make a mark in there. So, and not only that, when it pushes into that side grain, it kind of gets wobbly. So it's really never the center. When you go back to return the bottom and you try to put that, it crushes grain and it never centers right. Yeah, that's a good reason. Just Life Center, made by One Way makes one of the really good ones. Vic Mark. Anything craft supplies would probably be good. They're not going to sell you something you don't want, and they certainly don't sell this dinosaur. It might come with your lathe, but yeah. And you've got a 1/4 inch spike sitting out of that cone. You just lost a 1/4 inch of wood, unless you don't mind that spike in the middle of your bottom of your bowl or your vase. And you can put velvet over it. No, a better idea. Stuff it with turquoise. Now you know my politics. Okay, very good. All right, so I've got my wood beater here. This is just a really large gouge. This is what I work with at home. Go ahead and switch cameras there. So about an inch of cutting edge there, maybe a 45-degree bevel. Yeah, that's it. It's nice and sharp. You guys ready? So that'll be cutting right here. Yeah, and it looks. Is it dark for you guys?
Is that going to be very long?
We did a little
that
bit
gonna
of
be very
testing
long?
earlier.
2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah, that's right.
Go upstairs.
Well, I'm wearing headphones, dear, so you can, as long as you keep the volume down a little bit,
What?
as long as you keep the volume down, I can watch this, you can watch that.
Better? Yeah, I thought so too. Okay, let's check that out. So first order of business, I see a lot of, I'm going to use YouTube as a reference because I see
I got
people on
the
YouTube
camera shut
cutting
off.
all the time. And you'll see somebody back here trimming up the back of the bowl to get it kind of true or whatever. That's really just a waste of time, because your biggest problem with anything with large diameter is the outside diameter, because that's where all your weight is. So take care of that area first, then start trimming back here. So I get my tool rest parallel with the bed of the lathe, make sure it spins without any interruption there. Always get it as close to the work as possible. Rev it up. When I rev it up, I
Oh, the movie for this evening?
What?
The movie for this evening
didn't
is
hear
Little Women.
squirrels earlier.
The movie for this evening is Little Women.
Yep.
On where? Here?
I think that just
at
might
the
be the
theater.
legs. Oh yeah, there
You
we go.
want to do that?
Little minor adjustments here.
We'll see.
Okay, so just one pass across the front there. I'll tell you what my
Let me go
RPMs
get
are.
my night
My
gown
lathes
on.
don't have readouts, so it's
Mhm.
kind of nice to know. I'm always guessing, which I don't really care much about. As long as the hair on my neck isn't standing up, I'm good to go. All right. There'll be a little bit of bark come off here.
Yeah.
I'll keep as much diameter on the work as I can. Okay, let's stop and look at the wood for any defects. No cracks. We're all good. Okay. Now I'll start making a bowl shape, more of a calabash shape. I'm going to speed up my RPMs just a bit. Okay, you kind of see a
Josie.
calabash shape forming. And I haven't even moved my rest yet. And as a production person, that's a good thing, because I haven't been interrupted. And that's why I have a larger tool than most people would use. There we go. So I'll flatten off the back, put our tenon in. This is just a scraping cut. Okay, let's put a tenon in. This tool does 95% of all my cutting. It does the shaping, of course. It does the tenon, does my shear scraping, does my hollowing. And I move to smaller tools with the same grind when I do the finish cuts. And although I'll use this as a shear scraper for most of the way. Question? It's probably 45 here, and this is probably more like 30, so it's really steep. That just gives me more cutting area or more area to cut. My lathes don't. Well, this lathe, you can tell this poor lathe is just struggling with this gouge. Right, like,
Oh, fuck. Come on.
there you go. So my tenon's on. That's good enough. What I like to do now is just flip it over. I'm going to shape it with a bunch of series of shear scrapes, and then we'll hollow it out. And I like to kind of show you what I'm getting away with tenon wise here too. The tenon's less than 1/8 of an inch deep, and you'll look in the AAW journal if you get that. And there's an article this month about what I know about tenons basically, and I talk about how the chuck sits in the wood or fits with the wood to create a good hold. You know, turning for a living, it would get really old if this failed you. And it never fails me. Well, it could. Notice how big it is compared to the object I'm making. And most of you folks aren't using chucks this size, which I would probably think you should, because anything over 10 inches, that's the chuck you want. Anybody know the size of that? Big Vic Mark? I don't know the numbers. 100, 150? Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's the bigger one. Yeah. Yeah. If there's a number on it, I don't know it. This little flat surface on the outside of that diameter, that's the most important part of the chuck. That's where the face of the chuck's going to meet with that. And if you don't have that, you don't have a good tenon hold. The depth of this tenon, which I said is less than 1/8 of an inch, so I get to keep all the wood there. That's not where you get your strength. It's that surface there. So if I made this tenon 1/2 inch deep, still the same hold. Okay, because it's that surface there that keeps you from twisting out. Okay, and then if this was end grain, you couldn't break that if you tried. So something to think about. And this will be pretty, I think, when we're done. A little bit more water on one side than other. Thanks, Joel. Planned that, did you? That'll just make it rock a little bit more. That's okay. I have some tools up here that compensate for that lack of moisture on one side. Ouch. Yep, we'll spray it. Okay. Get that in there. Okay. Tighten that up. Questions, anybody? It's 6 months. But it's been in the log. Yeah. Yeah, so I would say, moisture's we always remember that wives' tale. For every inch of thickness in wood, it takes a year to dry. 2 inches, 2 years, 3 inches, 3 years. Crap. Don't believe it. It's not true. Well, there's some deterioration here, but we'll mitigate that with some clean cuts. So where that water is where it's degraded most, which makes sense because when that moisture is sitting in maple's a really sugary wood, and it gets attacked by fungus a lot easier than say walnut or oak. That's why you don't use maples for certain water-borne conditions like you would say a white oak or a redwood or something like that. So yeah, that moisture is deteriorating the wood. And think about the drying process. All these blanks that Joel brought me here today don't have cracks. And I sent him a text last week and I said, I need a 10x4 defect free. And that's not easy to do, but Joel can do it. If it has a defect in it, for me, it ruins it. It makes it BTU wood, British thermal units. We heat our home with it because if you know how to work with wood properly. And so I think, just to give you a philosophy again, about if I make a bowl like this and it had a little small crack defect here, and most hobbyists would keep it, do all they can just to keep as much wood in there, and you fill that with cyanoacrylate glue, acrylic glue, and that's a structural crack. Now, if you put glue in a little beetle hole there, that's different. That's okay. That's not a structural defect. But if it's on the rim, you've just doomed your work to the garage sale at best. But it's going to go to the trash bin a lot quicker. I'm always telling people, use good wood. Use good wood. It's important to use good wood, because there's a lot of good wood in Sacramento. I grew up here. I know there's
So
lots
did
of
you
it.
say I can
You
watch
just,
TV?
you don't, and if it's got cracks in it, it's also dangerous. So especially in the structural sense. I don't know why I came over here, but talk about cracks maybe. I don't know. Senior moment. There's lots of those. So yeah, Joel got me this piece of wood. I said defect free, because what I demonstrating in front of people, you don't want to have troubles. And at home, I would never use a defect, so why would I use one somewhere else? But it really will reflect on the work in the future. So something to think about. Okay, let's do a series of shear scrapes, then we'll pop out the inside. So it's still not completely true. Let's clean this up a bit. Just some light cut, just to get it true. Let me clean up the rim. The wood there doesn't like to cut. Interesting. This is a shear scrape. Just refining it. I'll even pick up my RPMs a bit. I've got my cut set, and I'm just looking at the profile. I could tell you a little bit about the shape here in a second. We're going to call this a fair curve. And a fair curve, and if you think about wood turning in general and what it is, the shapes that you see, they're just a series of beads and coves, maybe a few fillets, some drops, all those things. So if I look at that bowl, that to me is one big bead. It's one big fair curve. Now, if you want to mix in another line, that's difficult to do. If I had a whiteboard here, I'm trying to do all I can to extend the demo. I'm trying to think. Well, let me just pick up this one here. And what I'm trying to talk about, the shape here, just looking at this profile, is a cove right here, a bead going into what I call my signature design: cove, cove, bead. Yes. So cove at the bottom, going into a bead, this long bead, and then a cove, then a cove, then a shorter bead. And then you flip the bowl over here to the rim, and the rim is a bead going into a cove. And then going into the bowl is one big interior cove. And in that whole system of beads and coves, I want the curve to be fair. I don't want anywhere where light will trap where the line was untrue, where it was not clean. And you see it all the time where that curve just has like a flat spot in it and shoots over. And I always when I have to be, I'm the lucky guy that has to critique these things at symposiums and things. And I walk in, I'm everybody's friend, and when I leave, I got one friend. Way to go! So think about that. Like when I come over here to some of the shinier work, and the shine really reflects light. And if you don't get the curve right in that shiny work, it really shows. My work isn't shiny, so I can hide some imperfections occasionally. But yeah, and again, just let's think of a different design here. Um, Fair curve, which is one big bead. That is a chamfer, which is also typical. If you just look at old European spindles on legs, look how they connect the beads and the coves and the fillets and the chamfers, and some of them are very successful, some of them are not. Cove, kind of or long bead, chamfer, cove, another chamfer, and then a long bead going into a cove, coming back into a bead into a cove. That would be a very traditional way to think about design. I don't make contemporary work because contemporary work is really hard to do and to do well. When I see contemporary work that's good, it's amazing. But as a guy who did this for a living, I never took a lot of chances. I always kept it really simple. So every bowl that I made, all 250,000 of them had that shape. Now somebody say, "Oh, that's so monotonous." Well, no, it's not. It was a way to make a living, and I didn't have a job or I didn't have a boss, and I didn't have a lot of other things. So you just have to appreciate what you got. Um, so uh, yeah, that's it. That's my ideas on shape. So I got this one big fair curve, and I'm not going to change that curve. It's not going to have any abruptness to it. Just keep it simple, and I think when you look at wood turnings in books and things like that, and you see a lot of repetitious stuff, maybe, and the reason they're repetitious is because they're just good, and they don't. It's not. It's hard to improve on that good stuff. Okay, so quick sharpening job and see how well my grain's cut. I might sand it. Depends on how we're doing. Wow, not that good. Okay, I'm gonna give all my RPMs I can get. This wood's just kind of not, it's very cutting very good, but that's typical of the maples, this particular maple. I'm very familiar with this wood. I spent a whole career working with it and so familiar with it, it gives me allergies. I'm okay because it's green, but if I had to sand it and the dust would get up in the air, I would be in trouble. Okay, like that was the area I'm worried about. I'm still not convinced it's cut real clean, but and I have to get everything just right. There can't be any out of roundness at all. It's got to be. So once I get started hollowing out the inside, I have to work quickly because it's going to start to wobble. Okay, let's take a look at that. A little bit of torn grain there. So right there's the offender. So I'm just going to get it wet. This is the end grain. No, it's just not cutting clean there. It's no. I'm gonna be funny. I tell Joel to be defect free and give me good straight grain. This grain's got a curl in it, and that's why it won't. It just wouldn't cut clean. That's all right. I've had other people bring wood to me on a demo like this, and it had a couple nails in it. I always wondered, oh, so that water I'm hoping will lubricate the wood to cut cleaner. In my shop, when that happens, I use walnut oil, I use whatever the finish is going to be. Since my bowls are going to have walnut oil, I would use that as the lubricant, and it's night and day difference over the cut. And the analogy would be, just try to shave without a lubricant. That's the same thought here. You're going to get a much cleaner, easier cut. I'm going to use a little more water, and I can do a little better. Okay, one more pass, and then we'll get rid of the inside. And it really wasn't that bad. It's just I expect a little bit more out of myself typically. Okay, that looks pretty clean. Okay, let's haul it out. I think we won't be needing this for a while. Any questions, anybody? Please.
The second fold then and the large one, was that to keep your tool away from the top?
No. Good question, though. So you got this long curve coming down and it dead ends right before the chuck. This bowl is not going to have a bottom. So if I picture with my mind's eye this curve going down the bowl, it dead ends right in front of the chuck. But I've got lots of wood behind it, and that curve continues into the chuck. And I would do that with all my work, because if you don't do that, unless it's left this wood from right here in front of the chuck up solid, and you hollow out to it, you're not hollowing out to the real shape, because the real shape hasn't been defined yet. So I'll call that a clepted surface. That's an article that should be written about why that's important in design, because I can actually see the finished curve deep down inside the bowl. Yeah. So let's talk about that again. Get my finger there. So the question is why do I have this little clefted surface here? Is because my eye is seeing this curve and it dead ends right there, but I still have wood, 1/8 of an inch into the chuck. And that way I don't burn the whole tenon. Everything, if you make a bowl shorter or smaller in diameter, you devalue it. This tenon isn't going to be erased. It's going to be part of the curve of the bowl. And I think that could be a little bit technical. I'll write an article on it, I promise. Hey, let's hollow out. This can't go out around, so I'm just gonna take out a little bowl here. Slow up my RPM since I don't have a tailstock now. I'm going to remove the screw hole. We need lights, you guys? Too much? Better?
Better work. I'm not
Okay.
getting any strong feedback. So.
Yeah, there we go. I had cars like that in college. Gonna open it up just a bit more. Okay, let's leave that right there. I'm gonna flatten off this surface. This bowl's kind of making the lathe jump a bit, which is interesting. There's ways around that. Because as I haul that out, there's really if this is doing that, I've got some serious troubles. Because if it's going to be paper thin, then how does that happen? And it's interesting. I brought at the Amador County Fair, I brought out my big Vic Mark that we loaded and unloaded with the forklift, and I think if you had a chance to work on that while you were there, you probably wouldn't go back because you know what's waiting for you at home. That shaking machine. My legs don't shake, so and if they do, we sell them to other woodturners. No, they they don't. I just wouldn't buy one that would shake. So it's my business, so I've got to have good equipment. Okay, I'm just gonna core it out real quickly. This wasn't part of the demo, but just to save a little bit of wood, I'll just show you what I do at home.
I'm in.
Silver maple's not the easiest wood to core, but you'll see what it does. I just want a little bowl out of here so we don't have any waste, or very little. So I'm very deliberate with the tool.
What?
Forcing it in slowly. I'm going to open it up now. The chips are getting stuck in the groove. Go back to where I left off. A little bit of steam going on there. I'm just pulling the tool out to clean the groove. Clean out again. If you think about what's going on here, I'm feeding a parting tool into side grain wood, which is a no-no if you've ever tried. It's like putting a parting tool on the side of a bowl. It just doesn't want to cut. But also what's happening is I come down the wood like this, I'm getting ribbons. But and then when I start turning the corner, I start hitting end grain fiber, then this whole thing will turn to powder, and that'll make the tool work a lot quicker. These ribbons they're like leather. They get in the way of the cutter and they clog up. So when I come around here, you'll get more powder coming off the tool. I'm going to speed it up just a bit, just to put a little more spice in it. You can hear the sound of the tool cutting the end grain. It's different as well. Going to clean it out again. That's the end grain. You can hear it. It's pretty much out now. There you go. So an extra. Now you can see when you put this in your hands, notice that torn grain that's there in the front. I'll come around here and give it to you. And that's what I was dealing with, trying to clean up. And the coring tool is just a scraping tool, so it would never cut the wood clean, as you can see by the bowl that came out of that. And again, this is wood related. If this was another species, that would cut a lot cleaner than that. and I'll pass this around if anybody hasn't been. Yes.
Following out goals and things, did you coach any following tool to facilitate part of this turning? No, I mean, it's fine. If it had already been done following, if you'd have continued following.
Oh yeah, if I didn't core it, yeah, I would have been done with the job, sure. But I get that. But see, in my business, I'm I wouldn't be doing this unless I was in front of a crowd. At home, I wouldn't be chucking up wood like this. It would be big. I would be getting 2 and 3 bowls out of this. This is really hot, guys. Not that hot. You'll be okay. Yeah. Yeah, I could. Yeah, even if the wood is poor to cut, I could still power through it. Um, yep, that's the way. Thanks, Tony. I get you. But a lot of times, like if this was Clara walnut, I could accord that in 15 seconds, and this wood just doesn't core because it produces these little ribbons that are like leather, and they get stuck in that groove while you work, and it's just tough. Okay, let's more questions before I go to hollowing. I'm getting close because there's not a lot of wood left. Check out my RPMs. I'm going to true up the rim now. I got to get that nice and clean, and it can't have a crack or anything. I'm the one that's going to need a light here, I think. No, I'll try it without. Okay. All right. So now we're ready to go. Let's go. I'll use the big tool here just to get the bulk. And then we're moving in a light so I can see it. Yes. Well, it's a 1/4 inch right there at the rim, but right behind it, it's an inch. So that's an inch right there. So that's an inch and a half down. I'm an inch thick, and that was meant to be. I didn't want to core out so good that I left my walls the same thickness all the way through. That would have been not good. So let's get some bulk out of here. I'm gonna drop my tool rest. It's as low as it goes. Sorry.
Hey, Mike, go ahead. Let them see the tool. I'll-
Oh, you can't even see if I got my hand there. Sorry about that. So I'm leaving all that bulk down at the bottom of the bowl. Now I'm going to start working on the sides. So that's a thin 1/8. And then right behind it, I'm a 1/4 inch right there. 3/8, a half. So could probably let me take out just a bit more. And then we'll go to the finish cut. Okay, that tool's no good. Now we go to the same tool, same grind, much smaller tool. Now, first cut's important because I'm going to try to take that down an inch or 2, or inch and a half, and get that to finish. Now, I've got to put my hand over the top of the tool because I don't want it. I'm not going to do that either. I don't want it to slide back. Yeah, I got to stop there. I've got to measure my wall thickness. So yeah, I want to stop there to make sure if I keep cutting, it'll be really difficult to come back. So I'm going to go after the finish right now. Still fairly thick, but I'm wobbling. Okay, check that. So I stopped right where I left off the first time, just took off more wood. That feels really good. I'm probably going to be okay there. I'll just leave that. Let's see. Oops. There's light coming through. That's kind of, can you guys see that? Oh, no, you can't. Well, okay. Leave that there for now. Let's go back to my bulk tool. Now I'm thinking about getting my depth. And here's my depth. Okay, check that. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Gail. Yes, it does. This curve coming back keeps the bowl a lot more stable. All the hollow forms, they won't even warp that much when they're like that. But if you make an open shape, they'll really move on you. Okay. This thickness right down there is approximately twice that thickness there, which is, I don't know, what is that, 2 mil, 1 mil? Okay, let's center up a little bit more. Okay, check that. And all the while I'm cutting, I'm trying to get that curve as good on the inside as it is on the outside. You don't want any transitions there.
In terms of tool movement, it looks like you're starting a little ahead of where you want to start with that.
Yes, I'm always start coming back and then blending the line. The way to get the curve in there is I'm adjusting the handle this way, back and forth to catch the bevel on the surface back here. So I right now I'm not cutting, so that tells me I need to bring the tool this way to cut. And once I set that cut, then I can come back in and rotate the tool into a good curve. Thank you. I think I'm done with that tool. Let's go ahead with the bottom tool. Now, let's go ahead. This is my traditional gouge. That's a bottom feeder tool. I think that's good, no? I'm not using this tool, so this was my wood beater. I don't need any of these right now for now. Better. Let me start this one on the other side, just so we don't poke our eyes out. Yeah. Okay. And now I've got to work fast. Case will be in court for years. All right, let me check my depth. This is a very fancy tool here. It's free. So I can go 1/8 of an inch deeper. That's what I'm thinking. Let's keep this wet. The moisture here is going to keep things supple.
Right?
Yes.
Not a good time to go in there with the round little scrape.
No, definitely not. It has to be cut. If you scrape it, you're going to blow it. I don't want the water to come off and hit the artwork in the behind me. That should do it. Okay. This will give me a nice smooth cut. And it's a big tool. way off the tool rest there. You can see a pigtail ribbon coming off. Michelle, going back to that last question you had, I'm cutting somewhere in the light colored area, but I start back here on the darker surface and try to find my bevel. There it is. And then push that through. Uh, right through the dead center. And this will pretty much ensure that I've got a nice clean cut without torn grains just through that process. Might have a little bump here at the dead center. I'll check my depth. Yeah. That's a different grind. This is called the bottom feeder. Yes, I tried to earlier. I'll pass it around here in a minute. I still can go a 1/16 of an inch with more depth.
And so we're supporting here, you've got hanging out.
Yeah, so let's say I bring the tool rest in like that, and it really doesn't buy me much because here's where the bevel hits. So I'm 3 inches off the tool rest with it in like that. And as I go down towards center, look what my tool stays in the same spot, and now I'm even further away. So that's why I wouldn't use a curved tool rest, but they want you to buy them. But unless you were scraping, it really doesn't help you. When I'm using a cutting technique like that, just being out here outside of the bowl is a little safer. I'm going to go for my depth. I'm low. This is as low as this tool rest goes. Somebody call the engineer because this is not. I would even be about a half inch below this at home. So let's finish up that curve. And what you don't see is me pushing hard down on the rest and making a very soft turn with my shoulders to make that cut. And I missed it. I'm probably going to have to live with that. Yeah, that's a good curve. I've got a little nub there at the dead center that I could rub out real easy. So it's not paper thin yet, but let's get to that. So you can see I can squeeze it. Let's clean that out. What's the question? I did one at the county fair the other day, right? Oh no, it was already built into the piece, but I've done them before. I do, it's hard to make mistakes when you do it all day. I'm up here turning and I'm singing the song in my head and having a conversation. That's my lathe would be spinning faster and the bowl would be a lot bigger. And so you're just, this is pretty simple stuff. So, in order to make this bowl thinner and not sand it, which sanding would be a good idea to do, or a good thing to do, because that would make it thinner, get some really coarse grit. But it's thin enough now that if you used 80 grit, it wouldn't be a good thing because it would mush up the grain. You'd want some thick areas, some really thin areas. Anybody recognize that? good old fashioned cabinet scraper. And then this is a little more exotic tool steel, and they're kind of teardrop shaped. I'm going to use, let's try this. I'm going to put an edge on this. And I don't have a lot of faith in this particular exotic tool steel. This is a really hard, I think it's A11 or A13, but I wanted to try it just to know because I haven't used it. But what I'm going to do, ooh, it's wobbling pretty good. I'm going to slow up my RPMs, put a little water in there. And now with my fingers behind the scraper, I can get this bowl thinned out pretty good. And you can see I'm picking up wood with the cut. So it's kind of a slurry because of the water and uh, the water that I put into the work. So I can go thin as I want to, depending on how much patience I have. Now that scraper there was made with a burr on the grinding wheel, and I'm not going to use this because I could tell it's just not cutting well, even though it's fairly sharp. When I give you this, just put your hand on the top of the large curve, and you can feel the burr, and that's what I was cutting with. Now this is a much softer tool steel, and it's made for this job. Now, what I could do here is I could do it like a wood turner would do it. This grinding wheel still going on here. Let me do it. Oh, that's a diamond wheel. Don't do that. I forgot. That's why I don't own any of those wheels. Okay, so I did the same thing here. So I just put a burr on the top there. Just right there, right where I'm going to use it. And then I'm going to rub that burr off. So I just took some 320 and knocked that burr off of that long surface there. Now I don't have any burr there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go old fashioned and pull the burr. So I've got a hard rod here. This is a screwdriver. And I'm going to pull on that cutting edge. And that puts an ocean wave of steel out on that surface there that's much sharper than what the grinding wheel will give you. So that's kind of old school if you ever pulled a burr. It'll last longer too. Typically, I have a carbide rod, and the thinner diameter, the better, because you don't have to push as hard. So if you got a big rod, isn't effective. So get something really thin and just pull that burr on there. And then I'll use that as my cutter. Yep, and that's already slicing the wood a lot more. And then, if I've got some thin spots or some thick spots, I can just stay away from them. And I keep that at an angle, so I'm not going straight at the wood like that. If that's horizontal there, I'm not scraping horizontal. I'm picking it up and angling it. So that gives me a shear scrape. Okay. You get the idea. So depending on how patient I am, I can keep going and keep going. Let me just take some 120 to it. I'll probably do that with some 120. Yeah, thanks, Shan. That Besley is. It's such a small nub, but it's definitely noticeable. So this will definitely thin out the bowl quite a bit, just the sandpaper. This is 120. I'll sand both sides at once.
Are you making it thinner?
Yeah. And smoother. It's definitely sandpaper can definitely do the job. It's just like those scrapers can. Just how much time you want to put into it. I had it in forward, now it's in reverse. It's not my lathe. It's fine to do that. Most lathes, if it's a DC motor that doesn't have the electronics in it, I have a feeling that's detrimental. But I'm gonna water sand here. No, yeah, exactly. I want to stand in both directions. What's that? Oh, no kidding. They should turn for a living. So the question was, or well, there's an article in the AEW says if you turn in both directions while you're sanding, you don't get any benefit. It's a bunch of hooey. Well, uh, any metal smith knows that even turning metal, you get better sanding process through turning in both directions. And wood or metal, you would not nearly notice it like you would in wood. Yeah. Well, a lot of things are subjective. Tool steels. I went to a tool steel and I went to one, they're talking about these grinding wheels, these diamond grinding wheels. And I sat through there, I figured it out. Do I need one? How does it benefit me? And I think to me, it makes no difference. The old fashioned friable wheel was just as good as the diamond wheel. And for my purposes, I agreed. And I went through, learned about the chemistry and everything, and it didn't sway me. I was like, I'm always swayed with a good argument for sure, but there was not one in that. Now, and I know wood, so as I sand in one direction and then sand in another, wood is constant. And that every one of those bowls there, when they were finished sanded completely, were deburred. I sprayed them with water, the grain rose, and I knocked those grains off again. And so we know grains are getting pushed over back and forth. And you don't even need a microscope for that. All right. Well, the sandpaper is nothing special. It's just a foam backed pad. And I like it because it keeps your hands cool, right? We might just leave it there. What time do we have to get out of here tonight? 8:30? That's good enough. We're gonna call that good. So you'll get to see how thin it is here in a minute. Let's so the process would just be more sanding to get it thinner. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be standard practice. There are times when the lathe isn't running, especially when I'm sanding the dead center of something. Like if this is a platter out here, I don't want, if that's spinning and I'm sanding right at the dead center, I'm doing too much work in the center. So I definitely take that and sand with the lathe off at the early grits, the 120s would be my coarse grit. Okay, I got the screw back on here. We're going to use that other blank of wood as a chuck. This is how we're going to take the bottom off of our. Well, I'm not going to ruin it. It'll just be another bowl in the future. You can see my screw's a little bent there. Now it's perfectly straight. All right. Questions, anybody? Keep them coming.
Yeah, you don't worry about that screw. It doesn't.
Yeah, that bent screw has been bent for years and it's still bent and it hasn't caused me any trouble yet. We exactly now it's centered. I'm you folks know who've been up to my house, I'm a farmer and we keep using things until they really have to be rebought. And the screw is the same thing. Where's that big tool? Oh, did this one get? Do you guys get to see the bottom feeder? We're done with this one. Thank you, Tony. I'll come back to get that. Yes.
It's just like random or something.
I use a 2, 3, and 4 inch disc, and it's a 2400 RPM drill. That's how I would power sand. Most definitely. I don't power sand everything because it doesn't need it. Some of the work that I do, the platters and things, you can cut them so clean, no reason to power sand them.
That's carried that line all the way through,
Very difficult.
wobble it center. Do you have any tips for?
Yes, I do, and it's patience. It's the worst kind of thing to learn. Wood turning is all about patience, and you think about, I thought a lot about craft in general. Wood turning is a very difficult craft, as we know, as we're in here. You know, basically, a craft is working with a resistant material and repetitively doing this, and that repetitiveness brings on memory, and then all that ties into patience, because patience is kind of like the mother of everything. It's the joy. Without patience, we couldn't even have relationships, right? So you have to just work into it. So let's get the shake out of this. All right, so now I'm going to cut a diameter that's that diameter and fit it on here. I'm going to cut a little more weight out of here. Just so the lathe doesn't shake that much. That's why I took a little bit more wood off. Still very viable as a bowl. So the height of it, um, so you're thinking of the middle, being in the middle. In this particular lathe, it's not helping me because the tool rest, I would be lower. So my cutting edge would probably be at the center of the lathe for sure. Not always, it could vary, but that's a good question. It needs to be answered. If you really want to think about general simple thoughts, the tip of your tool, wherever it is, should be at the center mark of the lathe. That you can use your tailstock for that center or your headstock. So that would this is a 3/4 inch diameter tool. That's not the same as a 1/4 inch diameter tool. So there's adjustments that need to be made, plus or minus little bits. It doesn't matter. There are certain instances that require certain tool rest heights. But instead of actually explaining how that works, it's way better for you to screw something up and learn by that example. That's not supposed to do that. The experience is always something you get just after you needed it. And that's one of those times. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to nick a little bit off of there and squeeze that on. Just going to sneak up on it. Get that nice and clean cut so it's rubbing on the wood real nice. And this is a very flexible timber as thin as I've gotten it.
Because if that wet, it won't crack out the roof.
Oh, it most certainly would. So I'm definitely not forcing it for sure. So I didn't cut it small enough, so I will now. So just, making really thin curlies there. I'm just squeezing it over that surface, and I can, oop, it was kind of suctioned on there. I can go just a hair smaller. Jam chucks like this are skill builders. If you took a class from me, you'd be doing these all day long. We don't allow the vacuum chucks because vacuum chucks are nice to have and everything, but they're not going to improve your skill. This type of chucking system improves skill. I am just you just got to know where I am when I'm doing them. All right. Ireland, England. So now I'm going to trim off the bottom here with the series of shear scrapes. Okay. Got a little bit of funky noise. I want to know what's happening here. I don't know the answer to that. It's, I probably would have never attempted this had I thought I'd break it. But this is standard wood turning. This is something you would have been taught in Northern England how to do, as an apprentice. It's having a hard time getting the gouge to cut back here. Scraping better than it's cutting. By my measurements, it shouldn't be that thin. So this grain here is just not cooperating. As you can tell, it's sounding very thin. No, it's not that thin. So I'm having a hard time getting through all that rough grain. Do you see that? It's all broken out. There's other things I could do here. Getting it wet's going to help. Instead of peel at it, I'm going to push cut it. And that's really not optimal, but I brought my little bottom feeder tool here. And so instead of properly cutting it from the smallest diameter to the largest, I'm going to go largest to smallest. And that usually cures that broken grain. It's like I said, it's not optimum because now you're going into the end grain fibers instead of peeling them away. And I'd like to pick up my RPMs if I could, but I can't. This will create a nice pigtail fiber, but it takes a lot more skill to do. And I'm putting pressure against my chuck. So it's real easy to knock the bowl off the chuck. It's cutting a lot cleaner doing it this way for sure. So let's, if I could just pick up my RPMs just a bit. Okay, one more cut all the way down. Actually, you know what? I'm going to shear scrape that. This wasn't the area it was giving me a hard time. Okay, let's take a look at that grain. Darn it, look at it's plucked out. Okay, we'll go back to the hard way. I don't know if you could see that plucked grain. Those little chops I was hearing were from that plucking. The only way to cure that is with a cut, and that's where I'm going now. And sandpaper. So this is the rare time when going against the grain works better. A lot of species are like that. The ash is a species that prefers being cut against the grain. Well, it's always hardest to cut that dead center because it's just moving so slow right there. You can see there's a little bit of shadow in that area. That's just because this area is lower than everything else. And this is when you get to the point. I could see I could start right back there. Yeah, let's go ahead. All right, that's a lot better. And I'm going to take the rest out with sandpaper. You want to look at that tool? All right, little 120. Any questions, anybody?
Striving for the same thickness as the bottom.
Yeah, I was thinking so. I'm trying. I hoping the bowl will be the same thickness all the way through, but we don't know that for a fact. Yeah, you know what the best thing to do for that is for you to buy it, and then we'll go cut it.
To be used.
Yes.
Is there any use for this sort of?
No, this is all showing off right here. Because that's not, it's fun to do, and it really is, and especially for a class and skill building. This is it. It really is a good skill builder. So that's why I would think to use in my classes. We always do this. And we don't strive for paper thin. We just want good quality wall thicknesses, and and again, and then we learn the jam chuck and everything like this, because not everything you do in life and turning wise is going to um, be easy to chuck. You could have a bowl that has holes in it or something, and you'd need a jam chuck system of some sorts.
It wasn't a part of it.
So there, let's find it. Oh, you don't have to do that, but it wobbles nicely on my hand there. Well, everybody will get to see it. A little thicker on the bottom, which is fine. It'll right the ship up easily that way. Yeah, that's all I got, unless you got questions.
Where did your bottom sniper tool that one, where'd you get that?
Bottom,
It's on its way around.
Oh,
the little guy, that little one.
Different grinds.
My name's actually on that tool, so those are made for me. For Carter and Son, they'll sell one to you. Yeah. What makes that tool unique is it has a bowl gouge on one end and a spindle gouge on the other, and that way I keep that tool right here on every one of my lathes. There's a little magnet. I don't use a handle with it because you're using it for fine cuts. You don't need a handle. If you need a handle, you're using it wrong. Yeah. That won't crack no matter what you try to do to it. It would just go in a cool, dark place. The thinness is what makes it good. So now if I left it 1/8 of an inch on top, 3/8 in the bottom, now you got a cracking issue. But the wall thicknesses are even. Unless I sit that down next to a air conditioning unit, it shouldn't have any problems. I keep it in a cool, dark place, slow up the drying process with a paper bag. The way I've been drying wood is crazy, and nobody would believe it. But especially with some of the hard to work drying woods like the white oaks that we have here, I will rough turn all that white oak and set it in huge clear plastic bags. All that works, and just suffocate the wood. And it I don't mold doesn't grow in there because I throw in Ajax, little powdered bleach, so mold's not growing in there. Could sit in there 3-4 months, and that wood just goes rigor mortis. And then I take that out, and probably in the fall, and they don't even move or crack, and they'll be dry. Well, because I got to see inside, see if the mold's growing. If there's mold growing, and mold will grow in the maple, so you wouldn't want that process. But the white oak, the mold doesn't grow very well, and not in my shop. Totally different chemistry in the timbers. You got to pass that around. What's that? Yeah, never let anything touch the sunlight for sure. Yeah, the sun really plays tricks for drying.
sprinkle or
Just a sprinkle. I'm not an authority on Ajax, but I'm acting like one here. No, no, I'm just kidding. I just sprinkle it to whatever you think will keep mold down, and I'll go in 2 or 3 times in the summer months and do it. Nothing. No, even the wine is in a shop that's 80 degrees right now.
Bags are sealed.
Yep.
Still dry, even moisture.
So think about this. The question was, the bag was still sealed, and how did it dry? Well, there is a little bit of moisture loss just through that thin plastic wall. And I know that for a fact because I have put things in plastic bags before and forgot about them and opened them up years later. Those things are bone dry in there. So definitely there's moisture left. But what's happening is a different chemical reaction. So when that tree was first cut, it was a fairly healthy tree, maybe. Let's just say it was healthy. But now that it's dead, it's no longer getting free water going up through its pores. And you keep it in that long log as long as you can. Within 2-3 months, that wood is no longer the same wood it was when it was alive, just like your dead carcass if you were laying there, So things kind of just atrophy. And that's exactly what happens in a log if it's dead standing or dead. You don't want the logs to lay on the ground too long because they get attacked by bugs. But if you find a dead standing tree, that's a superior drying wood because it's lost a lot of its free moisture already. So if I think about it, if Joel cut that wood down yesterday and he brought it, that would be a totally different turning job for me. It would cut so much easier. The wood would move a lot more when it dried. It would do a lot of things because that wood has still got some structure to it, but especially the maple, after it sits 2, 3 months, 4 months, it just loses, it just atrophies, and it's no longer elastic. So if you tested the hardness factor or the tensile strength of wood, which is a thing, the live wood as compared to the dead wood is totally different thing. And then what do we do as woodworkers? We put our wood in kilns sometimes. That totally changes the hardness factor of the wood, and it makes it much more difficult to turn. By the way, it's hotter. And it loses a lot of its durability.
The moisture in the wood and moisture in the bag. My understanding was that the moisture was drawn out because of the differential. There's as in the wood, it leaves the wood, but in the bag, you're saying even though that it could be dripping wet, the water continues to leave the wood.
It leaves the plastic too. Yeah, because it's going to. What's the name of that when it's evaporation, but there's a yeah. There's definitely moisture loss, even in glass. It happens, but not a lot. So it's interesting about that. Think. And one other thing that I didn't tell you about in the plastic bag thought is throw one of your wife's nice terry cloth towels in there and take that out every day and put a new one in. Just kidding. I have shop towels for that. Yes.